Sin just means not following God's law.
Well, we're at the very base premise of the video, and we already have infinity plus one questions that have no good answers. For starters, I know you're talking about Christian sin, but the word comes from the Greek archery term, which means missing the mark. So that could have been fun to know, but it also assumes that you know what God actually wants. I mean, how are you supposed to not sin when every single thing called God's command is a thing that a human said God said? That is not very helpful. And that's ignoring the fact that it's not even real. But yeah, not a great start.
God's law is summarized in the 10 Commandments, which are all either about loving God or loving your neighbor.
Okay, aside from the fact that it most certainly does not summarize all the rules and commandments that God gave in the big book of bullshit, what's scary is just how vague your summary is. Okay, love God, fine. The fact that half the damn thing is narcissistic wank is whatever, but the remainder being love your neighbor? So what? What constitutes a neighbor? Should we not bother with people beyond the street you live on, or town, or province, or country? Where does it end? The word neighbor seems pretty deliberate to not mean every single person on the planet, otherwise why not say that? And then, what does love even mean? Does it involve any actual effort? If you see them drowning in their pool, can you still love them as they fucking drown to death? This is why vagaries are always so freaking useless.
The first commandment says to worship God and have no other gods before God. So obviously unbelief is a sin because you can't worship God if you don't believe in him.
And a primary example of how ineffective and useless the idea of sin is, you can sin while having no idea that you are doing so, without even the chance to understand the wrong that you are committing. Not to mention that it is a sin that harms no one, including God. Because if God's feelings can be hurt, then he's not exactly the all-powerful mega guy that he's claimed to be, but instead a blubbering baby who can't stand the idea of not absolutely everyone on earth constantly telling him how great he is. Again, narcissistic as fuck. Also, you can totally worship something that you don't believe in. Is that not the entire point of Pascal's wager? Do it anyway, just in case.
Existential fear is also a sin because it means you're not trusting God, which is a form of not worshiping God because faith means trust.
Wow, that's so fucking unfair. And again, you can trust something. You can believe that it is real, but have an irrational fear of it or something around it anyway. But that's simply not good enough for the God who apparently made you like that. No, if you can't help but worry because you have an anxious disposition, well, it's like saying that you're not tall enough to get onto the heaven ride, so fuck you, go to hell. And, you know, what is funniest of all this is the ultimate form of trust is doing something scary anyway because you put your faith in the person helping you get through it unharmed. It isn't called a leap of faith because it's super easy with nothing to worry about, dumbass.
But we need to clarify that this is existential fear we're talking about. Obviously, if a bear is chasing you, there's a good kind of fear that can help preserve you.
And don't bother asking God for help and having faith that he will, because he definitely won't. Because of how real he is, probably.
But if you're worried about how your life is going to go, that means you're not trusting God's plan for you. That's why Jesus says not to worry about your life, because God cares about you.
Then why the fuck are you worried about the bear? And what's the difference between the bear and running out of food? Or fuel in the middle of a long, empty desert highway? Or any number of other things that could put your life in genuine jeopardy? Worry, while unhealthy when it's completely out of control, is an extremely important mental mechanism for stopping you making stupid choices like not doing the shopping or punching your boss in the face for no reason. If caring where your next meal is going to come from is a sin, then God is a prick, not deserving of faith or worship.
Also, if we're only supposed to worship God, then self-worship is a sin, which covers a lot of other things like pride, selfishness, and narcissism.
Yeah, it's not like you were supposedly made in the image of a guy who's prideful, selfish, and narcissistic. Wait a second. Also, being proud of something is not the same as worship. I don't worship my kids, but I am proud of them. I don't worship myself when I get my taxes done early, but I sure as shit give myself a pat on the back when I do. Or I will if I ever do that.
The reason we're not supposed to worship ourselves is because we are sinners, but God is perfect.
So, who made you? God, yeah, and God is perfect, right? So, everything he does is perfect, correct? Yeah. So, humans are perfect. Wait, I didn't say that. And people love to tell you that the Bible isn't full of contradictions. Its very premise is contradiction incarnate. God is either perfect or he creates imperfect things. You actually cannot have it both ways.
The second commandment says to not make any idols or false gods. Of course, this means don't literally make a golden calf and worship it, but idolatry extends to more than just that, because not all idols are made with human hands. Many of them are made inside our hearts.
So this is obviously speaking to the idea that if you really like something enough, that's somehow immediately a form of worship. When worship is a really specific set of thoughts and actions that almost nothing but religion comes even close to. Again, I love and adore my kids, but you think I would be able to correct them if I literally worshipped them? And I'm a huge fan of video games, but they piss me off something fierce, and I will criticize their faults like there's no tomorrow. But if I were a crispy boy, God, I'm great, I suck, please, please, please don't burn me forever, but if you do, I totally deserved it. Yeah, it's not the same fucking thing.
For example, if we love money, social status, and sex to the point where we get our meaning in life from those things, that's idolatry too. It's not bad to want those things in general, but as the Christian pastor Tim Keller said, idolatry is turning good things into ultimate things.
First off, I want to make it completely clear that Redeemed Zoomer says it's okay to be a famous rich fuckboy so long as you don't care that's what you are. Cool. And even still, gaining meaning from your career or your rank in a club or being me, aka good at the sex, those things still aren't worship. Because again, you can still have issues with them, even if you really, really like them. You can say sex is great, but fuck me if my dick isn't sore. Wait, no, don't do that. It'll only get more sore. But you know what I mean. It's basically too much of a good thing is a bad thing. And would you say that about worshipping God? I bet you fucking wouldn't. I mean, I would, but I don't think it's a good thing.
Another form of idolatry is worshipping God in the wrong way. It would still be wrong to worship a golden calf even if we said we were worshipping God through it, because God decides how he wants to be worshipped. We don't get to worship God however we want.
Never ever forget, dear Christian, you picked the right version of Christianity. All those other ones are wrong, and their proponents are all going to hell. Now, I just want to know how you picked the right one, and how you know it's the right one. It would seem a completely impossible task to any rational person with half a brain who considered for even a moment that you could literally never know that. But I'm sure you have a brilliant secret, right? And it's not because it's what my parents believe. Surely.
Also, since the second commandment says to not worship any graven image, many Christians think we're not supposed to make any images of God at all because we might be tempted to worship them.
He actually ends that bit with absolutely no clarification of his position on that, which is super weird for someone who's clearly sure he's picked the right one. Ultimately, yeah, any symbols for God that you use to worship him across a crucifix, a fucking church, hell, even a YouTube channel, cough cough, all of these things are a form of idolatry depending on how you look at it. Better to just not worship him at all to be safe. Sort of a reverse Pascal's wager in a sense.
The third commandment is to not misuse God's name, because doing so is blasphemy. The reason blasphemy is so bad is because God's name is holy and must be seen as worthy of respect. That's why it's wrong to use God's name as a curse word or a casual expression, because it's not using God's name in a sacred and holy manner.
Again, another victimless sin. If God can't have his name used in a way that he hasn't strictly defined without having a fit about it, what kind of God is he? A pathetic one. And that's assuming he even gives a damn what you do with modern words that kinda sorta mean him, but also mean literally any other deity under the sun. Tell you what, the next time I say God fucking damn it, and a God turns up to tell me to stop, I'll just worship that one. Sounds fair?
However, it's also wrong to make jokes about God, and here's why. According to any culture, the one thing you're not allowed to joke about is that which is sacred.
Wow, you don't know anything about cultures outside of the one that you exist in, or the one that you exist in for that matter. The idea that you are not allowed to joke about the sacred is in and of itself the biggest joke of all. The sacred is almost universally some of the funniest shit to joke about. Not because you can't joke about it, but because someone out there will get real mad about it. Oftentimes with no real consequences to joking. No one gets hurt. No one died. Just someone does a big sad. Who gives a fuck? Me, because again, calling God a dipshit is always funny.
According to our culture, one of the worst things is to make a racist or sexist joke.
Well, that depends entirely on who you ask. Some people don't like them, some people do. In my opinion, while I'm not exactly a fan of the genre, it tends to depend on the context of the people making the joke and why. And most importantly, the quality of the joke. Seriously. Probably the worst thing about people who go around making racist jokes all the time is, in general, they aren't fucking funny. They will literally just say anything and then have some culture as the punchline and think that automatically makes it hilarious. It is the ultimate form of cringe. I've always said it. If you have to be an asshole, be a funny asshole. Like me.
The reason our culture is so sensitive about that is our culture sees equality as something sacred, which is why you're not allowed to joke about anything that offends that.
Again, simply not true, especially where you're presumably from. There are literal doctrines that allow people to say whatever the fuck they like about whatever the fuck they want, and essentially no one has the right to stop them from doing that. I mean, it isn't the same as there being no consequences for saying something really fucking gross, but you won't go to prison for it, and if someone jumps out of the bushes and punches you in the face for making an off-color joke, they are going to be considered the bigger asshole in the vast majority of cases. But the amount of fuckers who will defend a religious fundy after they commit wild acts of violence against people for hurting their religious feelings is absolutely crazy.
So, if we see God's name as sacred, we shouldn't joke about God's name either, because in any given culture, you cannot joke about things that are sacred.
Again, if you want to use how society acts about the sacred, then we can absolutely make fun of God. Good job being useless.
There's several other ways to misuse God's name. Doing evil in God's name is one of the worst sins because it causes the name of God to be associated with evil rather than good. It's also a big sin to use God for selfish gain, like a lot of those prosperity gospel preachers whose churches are just a big money scam. And I personally think stupidity in God's name, like using the Bible to defend silly things like a flat earth conspiracy theory, is also a form of blasphemy because it causes Christianity to be associated with stupid things.
So then these videos are a form of blasphemy. Good to know. Also, God doesn't need you to do evil in his name. He invented evil. Every bad thing that ever happens is literally his fault. That or he isn't the creator of everything.
The fourth commandment is to remember the Sabbath, and the Sabbath is one day out of every 7 days that is set apart and dedicated to the Lord. The most basic way to observe the Sabbath is to go to church on Sunday, so skipping church without a good excuse is a violation of the fourth commandment.
Well, first, I believe the Sabbath isn't strictly a Sunday, according to the Bible. I think it's actually a Saturday, so technically, you have been skipping your whole life if you only ever go on Sundays. Oops. And second, I'm pretty sure the Bible, you know, the thing that is supposed to be God's word, doesn't say anything about going to a specific old building at all. Gatherings are good, but there's no mandate that you have to do it once a week in a specific place and tell him he's so cool. So the whole thing about sin being what God commands isn't actually true by your own lackluster standards.
We're also told to rest on the Sabbath, and interestingly, laziness is a version of breaking the command to rest. How does that make any sense? Well, a wise person once said, no one is ever really too busy. If they care, they will make time. So if we care about making time for God and resting on Sunday, we will get our work done on all the other days of the week.
Well, that was an incoherent mess of a nothing, wasn't it? Laziness is not resting, but on the day you worship, you should also be resting while also doing a physically demanding task of screaming about how much you fucking love God, as opposed to sitting down and actually unwinding. Also, you should work 6 days a fucking week, apparently, considering the 5-day work week is falling out of vogue as a needless exercise that makes most people less productive than if they'd only done 4. But yeah, working 6 days and then telling God he's great on the 7th. I guess you can rest on the 8th day. What the fuck?
The fifth commandment is to honor and respect your parents. Bro, what if my parents have problems? Doesn't matter, everyone's a sinner, you still have to respect them.
Oh, wow. fuck you, buddy. What if my parents have problems? Yeah, this shit is why I will never believe people who say you lot are just misguided when you clearly and intentionally take topics that require actual depth and then simplify them to harmful absurdities. You are telling people whose parents kick the shit out of them every day that they have to respect those pieces of trash. You're telling someone whose mother or father sexually assaults them that they have to do anything other than throw that fucker into the sun. No, abusers are not parents. They're scum, and they should be treated as such. And anyone who attempts to minimize that is a giant head. And yes, I understand that a lot of this shit comes from their parents doing the same shit to them, but it's called breaking the cycle for a reason. Do that, not fuck up your kids.
Because God has ordained earthly authorities, such as parents and the government, and therefore it's a sin to disobey either of those things.
You don't believe that. And if you do, you are actually a fucking moron. First off, you really believe that God ordained any and all theist dictatorships that aren't Christian ones? That's a weird thing to do. And what about secular governments? Yeah, I'm sure he fucking loves those. And hell, not to be all internet about this, but the Nazi government, regardless of what you think Hitler did or didn't believe, was absolutely a strongly religious institution. Do you actually think that God wanted that? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but I have a funny feeling that you might try to argue your way out of that fact. God with us wasn't just a bit of self-aware irony, for fuck's sake.
Yes, both of these authorities are imperfect in many ways and often sin themselves, but God knows that without them society would collapse. So God ordains these authorities in order to restrain human evil.
You are either a genuinely despicable piece of shit, or you are so stupid that you think that a parent who beats their child to death and a child not allowing that to happen are on equal footing. That is not restraining evil. It's just evil. What the hell is actually wrong with you? Oh, right.
The sixth commandment is, don't murder. Yay, I haven't done that not so fast.
I never said I haven't killed anyone, but don't worry. If I did, I promise you, they were super annoying.
According to Jesus, anytime you hate someone or you're really angry with someone, that technically counts as murder, because those feelings taken to their extremes and without a legal deterrent would lead to murder.
Wow, Jesus was a fucking moron. There is no situation where me angry at my kids will end with me fucking murdering them. Because I wouldn't get to that extreme version because I'm not a fucking lunatic. Anyone who thinks they need to be constrained by God or the law is a functional psychopath. If you were moral, you wouldn't kill people regardless of motive or opportunity. And if you only believe you would because some asshole told you that, again, you're an idiot. Think for yourself, for fuck's sake.
Also, abortion is something that counts as murder, so that should be treated as murder.
Considering that murder is a legal definition of unlawful killing, and you said yourself that you should follow God's mandated government, then if abortion is legal, it's not murder. And now you have to do it because God said so. See? This is fun.
The seventh commandment is, don't cheat on your husband or wife. Yay, I haven't done that either. Again, not so fast.
Well, I don't have a husband, so I'm at least halfway there. Also, I don't have a wife. Get this, Mrs. Sick is something she chose to call her internet character, not a legally binding document. And I guess this is probably the most important part. I have never and would never cheat on her. Do you know how much work a normal relationship is? Imagine having to keep a second one secret as well. Fuck that noise.
According to Jesus, if you have ever looked at someone with lust in your heart, that counts as committing adultery. So lust is a seventh commandment violation. Jesus also said that divorce is a seventh commandment violation because it violates the covenant of marriage. So really, adultery could be any form of sexuality that violates the marriage covenant between one man and one woman.
Aside from the fact that think it equals do it equals dumb, so long as I have permission to bang every person I meet, the marriage, I don't currently have, is still fine. Which does beg the question, what if you don't think about fucking people at all? Asexuals exist. Lust is literally not something they are capable of. So, not sin. Huh.
So that would mean pornography is a form of adultery. It would also mean that fornication, or sex outside of marriage, is a seventh commandment violation. It would also mean that same-sex relations are a seventh commandment violation.
Oh, of course you're a homophobe, which according to you goes against God's wishes, considering that same-sex relationships are almost certainly legal where you live, if not full-on gay marriage. So again, now you have to do it. And since I'm here, I accept. I'll see you in the church and we will be very happy together.
The eighth commandment is don't steal. So of course this applies to actual thievery where you're stealing real physical or monetary property, but it also would apply to things that are technically legal but still results in stealing people's stuff, like unethical business conduct or scams. Traditionally, the church has been opposed to usury or money lending because the church has seen that as falling under the category of unethical business conduct.
You know what's a scam? Being tax exempt because you hang out once a week to tell some guy that he's awesome. But I release 2 videos a week, and a lot of my audience think my videos are pretty good, and yet I have to pay my taxes like an asshole. Pfft, what a rip.
Now, stealing applies to money and property, but gossip has also been traditionally seen as a form of stealing, because in gossip, you're stealing someone's good name for your own benefit, and also stealing some of their social status. So that's why gossip also definitely counts as an eighth commandment violation.
That is fucking moronic. I mean, you tend to gossip when people do shit worth talking about. This assumes that everyone does nothing but kind and loving things. But when someone does something worthy of note, people are going to talk about it. And if they did something bad, it's actually kind of important that people actually know, so that others don't fall victim to it as well. And I'm not defending idle, mean-spirited goss, but to pretend that there's no reason to ever do it is, again, idiotic. God just doesn't want people talking about how he got a teenager pregnant. Dirty old bastard.
The ninth commandment is don't bear false witness. In other words, don't lie about what someone did. If you accuse someone of something they didn't actually do, that's just as bad as if you had actually done the thing yourself, because the blame is going somewhere and it's going to them instead of you.
Again, that's just not true. Now, I ain't going to lie and say that there's no such thing as reputational harm and that there shouldn't be consequences for lying about someone else's actions, especially when they didn't do anything. But to say that murdering someone and pointing at someone and saying they am a murderer are the same thing is just as stupid as thinking about fucking someone else is the same as bringing a stranger home and banging them while making unflinching eye contact with your spouse. It's just dumb.
Now, it's also just bad to lie in general, because Jesus said at the end of time we'll have to give account for every word we have ever spoken. Now, of course, someone's going to say, what if you have to lie to save someone's life? Like, what if you live during the Holocaust and you're hiding people in your attic and then the SS people show up at your door?
Oh, hey, it's an actual, honest to non-existo ethical dilemma for you. For anyone who's not laboring under ridiculous absolutist dogma, it's super fucking easy to solve. Let's see how he completely fails to answer this in a satisfactory way.
Well, first of all, that's probably never going to happen to you in real life. And second, Jesus spoke more of following the spirit of the law than the letter of the law. For example, Jesus was willing to work on the Sabbath if it was for the sake of helping people, even when the religious Pharisees got mad at him for doing so.
Well, number one is a lazy dismissal. The point of a hypothetical is to answer it, not make up excuses how that could never happen. And for second, the comparison of working on the day you aren't supposed to and making some dipshits mad to lying to the SS, a famously brutal organization with painful and deadly consequences for finding out, really downplays the situation at hand. Nice.
So yes, maybe there are some cases where one good trumps another good, but in most cases the law is pretty clear on what to do.
And he didn't even answer the question, which is as funny as it is completely expected, but then jumps back to the law as well, which is where his whole God-ordained government shtick completely falls apart. The law would be tell the Nazis where they're hiding. If you would do that because it's the law, congratulations, you're a morally repugnant fuckwit. Following orders was never a defense against doing the obviously morally disgusting.
The 10th commandment is don't covet or don't want something that someone else has. So this means envy is a sin, whether you're jealous of someone's house, someone's car, or someone's marriage.
Well, I'm envious of anyone who's not currently making this video. So envious, in fact, that I'm going to stop because you're a fucking dumbass. And I am done. Therefore, no longer envious. Therefore, not a sinner. Bye!